Hey guys, I've been a Challenger player for the last 4 sets and just thought that I'd release one last flex guide before the huge patch next week where they nerf all the reroll comps. In the current patch, there are 2 Duelist players every lobby, 1 SAMIRA player, around 2 Jax players, 1 TALIYAH player, and then the rest of the lobby is probably going to be playing reroll comps. These are going to be the main comps you want to focus on. Duelists are extremely strong just because the locket exists. They usually end the fight in 10 seconds if their front line is strong enough. SAMIRA is back in the meta just because Duelists are back. This strengthens the AZ tree, which gives another out if you're playing AZ. Jax is one of the most consistent top 4 comps of all time just because of how much support they get from all the augments. TALIYAH is a really strong capped out AP board just because TALIYAH is able to one-shot most boards in the current meta. And finally, there are going to be all the reroll comps. One note is that you can't actually force these reroll comps. These comps are all augment dependent, so you should definitely know how to play each of these reroll comps because if you get the right augment for it, it's almost always a free top 4. I also have a lot of the instant top 4 augments listed here. For example, if you get any of these augments, just reference this guide to see what you should play, and you should be able to secure a top 4 from that spot. Without further ado, let's get right into the guide. So the first comp is just going to be reroll WUKONG. You only want to play this comp if you get the hero augment for him, Cyclone, and the game plan for this is to just 5 lose into neutrals and then slow roll at level 5 above 50 gold. You want to pick up all the supers and mech units along the way, and if you're close to 3-starring them as well, you do want to do so because you will end up playing 3 supers, and the extra 3-star will give your WUKONG more damage. Best in slot WUKONG is just going to be BT plus 2. There are a lot of different combinations you can go. You go BT Spark Titans, BT JG Titans, BT Redemption JG, BT JG Hodge. BT is really good because the shield scales off Wukong's base HP, and because you're eventually going to be playing 5 mech, Wukong's going to have 5k HP and yet a 2k shield from BT. So later on at level 8, your board is probably going to look like this. You're going to just add in 2 more mech, and you're going to be sacking the set and the Jax to make your Wukong stronger. If you end up 3-starring your Draven, you could try secondary carrying him, and you also want to secondary carry your Leona as well. This comp is actually really busted if you get mech spat. The reason why is because at level 8, Leona is actually kind of hard to find. So if you get the mech spat, you can just put the mech spat on someone you 3-starred, and then Wukong will absorb all the extra HP from the 3-star unit. Okay, so next I'm going to cover reroll mascots. So there's a new variant where you play reroll Lulu instead. I'm going to cover both the Lulu and the YUUMI variant in this video. So in the Lulu variant, you only want to play the Lulu variant if you get the hero augment growth spurt. And the game plan for this is the exact same thing as YUUMI. 5 lose into Krug, slow roll at level 5 above 50 gold, and then you all in at 4-1. So best in slot Lulu is just going to be blue buff plus 2, just like YUUMI. And in the other variant where you play YUUMI, this one is not as augment dependent because YUUMI is just individually a strong unit. But if you do get predatory precision, it's usually a free first. And if you get the predatory precision augment, you probably don't want JG because that augment already gives you crit. But anyway, at level 8, your board is probably going to look similar to this. So if you're playing the Lulu variant, you usually want to play 4 heart. So in this case, your board would probably look something like this. You have 3 supers, 4 heart, and 4 mascots. And if you're playing the YUUMI variant instead, you want to itemize YUUMI instead, and then you drop these 2 shitters, and then you play 2 more mascots for 6 mascots. And in this case, it's just going to be Nasus and Nunu. And both of these comps are busted if you get the mascot emblem. The reason why is because Nunu tends to be a bit hard to find. So this lets you spike with 6 mascots without finding Nunu, which is inherently broken. So next up is going to be reroll EZREAL. You only want to be playing EZREAL if you get the hero augment Rising Spell Force. And for this comp, you want to be slow rolling at level 6 instead of level 5 because the main unit you want to 3-star is going to be a 2 cost. So basically, game plan, 5 lose into Krugs as usual at 3-2, roll down for this board to stabilize, and then you slow roll above 50 gold. And you take all of your underground cash outs and cash out on the first heist. Use that gold to 3-star your board. And then after you 3-star most of your board, you just push level. So EZREAL really likes blue buff plus 2. Usually a very good itemization for him is blue buff Gunblade plus JG or blue buff Gunblade plus GS. So next up is Jax. And Jax is probably the most contested comp of the current meta. And there are a few reasons for that. One reason is that there are a lot of augments that encourage you to play towards this comp. For example, if you just take a look at this list, Vi Hero Augment, Riven Hero Augment, Renekton, Blitz, Lee, they all encourage you to play Jax, and it doesn't help that both Jax Hero Augments are actually really good. There are a lot of normal augments as well, like Scoped Weapons, Battle Mage, if the admin is good, Brawler Heart, Crest Crown, usually a free top 4. And another really good strength of Jax is that this is going to be a roll at 3-2 or 4-1 comp. And Jax, if you get an early Jax Orb, Jax is actually a really strong unit that could carry you into stage 3. But anyway, game plan for this is you want to roll down for this board at 3-2 or 4-1, depending on your HP. And then you scout the lobby and see if you're contested. If you aren't contested, you roll down onto your stable, and then you econ back up to roll down again at level 7 for 3-star Jax, Riven, and then you play around your Soraka as well. If you are contested, you just want to play for tempo and save as much HP as possible and slam every single item you have. The reason why is because you're probably not going to hit the 3-star Jax anyway. So then you just want to go 8, play 2 Aegis or play around your Soraka, and then get your top 4, get the fuck out. Best in slot Jax is probably RFC plus 2. I've come to realize that RFC is a lot better than Rageblade on Jax, just because Jax doesn't need to take time walking around to hit their units. So this ends up increasing Jax's damage by a lot. But if you only have one bow, don't be afraid to slam the Rageblade for tempo, because Rageblade is actually also a pretty decent item on Jax as well. One last note is that you don't actually have to play around the Soraka. For example, if the admin is shit and you don't have any items to itemize Soraka, just don't play the Soraka because the Soraka is a dead unit. You're way better off just playing another Aegis unit like Echo from our frontline, because Jax is your main carry. But if the admin is good and you have blue buff plus 2 damage items for Soraka, then feel free to play the Soraka because she'll be an amazing secondary carry. So next up is going to be reroll threats, and reroll threats is a comp that is extremely augment dependent. Usually only want to play it if you get Triforce, the threat augment, or loaded dice. Usually you have to roll a little bit at level 6 at stage 3-2 just to stabilize your board a little, or you're going to bleed out. But once your board is stable, you can then go level 7 and then econ back up and roll down to restart all of your units. Your primary carry is usually Kaisa, and then you want to put all your AP and attack speed items on her, and you could secondary your Vayne. Alternatively, if you're very far off from Kaisa, you could also primary carry your Vayne instead. And if you don't want to play this variant, there's actually another variant you could play that involves Senna instead. It looks something like this, and instead of Kaisa and Vayne, it's just Senna, Sever, and then your frontline is going to be Galio, Alistar. If you're too broke to reroll, or you're too poor, there is a tempo variant where you just push levels and play around all the threats instead. Primary your Acel and secondary carry your Belveth, or the other way around. So next up is going to be TALIYAH, and TALIYAH is going to be a level 8 comp because there are certain legendaries you need to hit to be able to cap your board. For example, in the Spellslinger variation, it's going to be Janna, and in the Star Guardian variation, it's going to be Syndra. So if you're playing the Spellslinger variant, it's just going to be every single Spellslinger in the game. It's especially stronger if you get a Spellslinger spat, but you want to put all your tank items in your Annie and all your damage items on your TALIYAH. For itemization, because you're only playing 3 Star Guardians, you really do want the Shojin on your TALIYAH because she's going to need the extra help generating enough mana to cast. And then for your 2 damage items, it's usually going to be JG plus Guardbreaker. Guardbreaker is actually extremely good in the current meta because every single relevant comp has some type of shielding. Even duelists somehow have shielding because they end up stacking lockets for their front line. If you're not playing the Spellslinger variant, which in my opinion is the stronger variant, you could also play the 5 Star Guardian variant if you don't hit your Spellslingers. In this variant, you actually don't need the Shojin because you already have so much mana generation from Star Guardians. So in this case, you could just go triple damage and this will allow you to one-shot their entire team. Alright, so finally, we're going to go through the AZ tree. The most consistent comp of the AZ tree in the current patch is going to be Duelists. The reason why Duelist is so strong is because you could actually top 4 lobbies without rerolling for any units. For example, a board like this at level 7, as long as you 2-star everything, maybe 1-star Zed, you could still top 4 as long as you have lockets. The difference between top 4ing and bot 4ing with this comp is really the lockets, because these fights with Duelists, they usually end in 10 seconds, and the fights are decided on how fast you melt through their front line. So if you don't have the lockets, you have no front line, you lose instantly. If you do have the lockets, you have so much damage that you just annihilate their entire team. So another variation is if you get a Duelist Spatula, or if you get the Augment. So if you get the Augment where you get an extra Duelist in your team, you can play 8 Duelists at level 7 and your board will look something like this. Hacker is fake on Zed if you're playing Vertical Duelist because the backline access doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things because you're just going to melt the front line in 5 seconds anyway. Alternatively, if you have the Duelist Spatula, you have to get to level 8 before you can play 8 Duelists, which is, in my opinion, a bit weaker. Finally, if you're playing around a reroll variant of Duelists, for example, let's say you get like Siphoning Winds for Yasuo. Because you're playing around the Yasuo, you want to slow roll at level 6 for a board like this and try to 3-star all of your units. And in a board like this, I would say that lockets are a bit less valuable just because this type of comp, if you're rerolling, has the front line you need. You actually want to prioritize items for Yasuo. So best in slot is probably, for reroll Yasuo at least, it's going to be Titans JG. There's the variant where you reroll for Kale instead. You only play this comp if you get the one where it buffs Kale. In that case, you want to slow roll at level 5 instead because Kale is a 1 cost. But anyway, you usually want to go for the 3 supers, and if supers are contested by another reroll player, you could also consider the variant where you're playing around Vertical Duelist instead, but you 3-star the carry you choose. And then in that case, because you're not playing supers, you usually lack a lot of tankiness because you don't have 3-stars. So in that case, you really do want the lockets on your team. So next up is going to be SAMIRA. And SAMIRA, I would say, is probably the most capped board in the current meta right now, simply because SAMIRA has access to almost every single legendary unit in the game. And I would say that if you're able to get to level 9 and 2-star your entire board if you're playing SAMIRA, you probably will end up winning the lobby. So really good items for SAMIRA are Last Whisper, Runan's Guardbreaker. GS is also good, IE is also good. It's pretty flexible with AD items, and the core to SAMIRA is just going to be SAMIRA Aphelios plus Echo, Leona, and Alistar. There are a lot of different variations you could play, but this is a level 8 comp because you need to be able to roll for all of the legendary units. One variation you can play involves 4 Aegis, and in this variation, you're just ending up playing more frontline with Vi and Sejuani. You could also splash in the Janna for extra utility. Another variation is to play around 3 Civilian instead. In this case, you're playing around the Sivir. So if you get a Sure Shot emblem, you could play Aphelios and put the Sure Shot emblem on another unit to get 4 Sure Shot, which is a huge spike for your team. If you get a Sure Shot spat or emblem, you almost always want to play towards SAMIRA. The last variation is to just play around all of the legendary units. So in this case, you're just going to be playing around 2 Sure Shot, and you just click every single high cost unit you could find. So in this case, the high priority units are Fiddlesticks, Zac, Urgot, and Nunu. Okay, so next up is going to be Belveth, and Belveth is a pretty good top 4 comp, and it's one of those comps where you use as backup in case you miss your SAMIRA or your Duelist on your roll down. So for example, if you're trying to play SAMIRA, no SAMIRAs, but you hit a random 2-star Belveth, just play your Belveth, take your top 4, and leave. So some really good items for Belveth are BT, Last Whisper, GS, Hodge is good, IE is good, Deathblade is good, Runans is good, Gwyntu is also good as well. Belveth is just extremely flexible with all of the AD items, and because Belveth is a tempo comp anyway, best in slot doesn't actually matter. You just want to save as much HP as possible and then get the fuck out. Another alternative to the threat board is to primary carry your Acel instead. If you have a lot of AP items, this is a good alternative. And then you can just put a Thieves Gloves on your Belveth and your board will have enough damage. So the other variant is going to be the Aegis variant. You usually play this variant if you were initially trying to play for your SAMIRA, but you missed your SAMIRA. In this case, you just want to play for Belveth instead and try to play for a 4th or a 5th. So on to the AD reroll comps. The first one that really stands out is going to be reroll Ashe, and you only want to play reroll Ashe if you get the hero augment Corpse Focus. Some really good augments for this comp is also featherweights. Ashe benefits a lot from featherweights because she needs the extra attack speed. But like always, the game plan for reroll comps: 5 Loots into Krugs, slow roll at level 5 above 50 gold, because the primary unit we care about is Ashe and Renekton. So after we hit 2 out of 3 between Ashe, Renekton, and Gangplank, we could push level 6 and then slow roll for the rest of your 3-star units. For example, Lee Sin, Nautilus, and Yasuo. After you hit most of your 3-star units, you then push levels and put in any 2 random units you find, whatever you 2-star. So finally is going to be reroll Camille. Reroll Camille is only playable if you get either of the hero augments for Camille. And you just play your strongest board until level 6. Because Camille is a 2-cost unit, you want to be slow rolling at 50 gold above level 6 until you hit the 3-star Camille. And Camille is the only unit that matters. Once you hit your 3-star Camille, you can push levels and go 8. Best in slot Camille is BT, Titans, and IE. And because you're playing 2 Hacker with Zoe and LeBlanc, you want to give your Camille the Hacker buff. So once you go 8, you really do want to drop out of your shitty units like Talon and Silas. So your board is probably going to look something like this. Your 3 Renegade units are going to be Viego, Leona, and Camille. And then you're going to splash in any support units you find. For example, in this case, I'm just going to be playing around 4 Aegis just because it's a heavy AP meta. So in this case, Alistar, Echo, and Vi. So that sums up my last flex guide before the huge patch next week, where they're probably nerfing supers and all of the reroll comps. Again, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you considered subscribing to my channel or following me on Twitch. And I will see you guys next time.